Let's take a deep dive into object relations theory. This is our final transgenerational model. James Framo is the one that paved way to this, and there were a few other people that also did object relations theory. It's a lot of actually it's a lot of other people that contributed to object relations theories, but James Framo is the one that we know the most. So let's go ahead and get started and take a deep dive. Alrighty, so role of a therapist. This is your model where you are going to see the terms object, good or bad, and don't think it's like your object, something that you carry. These are your parents. These are your caregivers. These are the ones who raised you when you were growing up. It's the objects that are in your life. The therapist is described as the good object, the stable one. I'm the one that's on the outside, get to see, take a peep on the inside and see what's going on, right? I'm that internal figure that the client is able to internalize, because sometimes growing up, we may have those objects in our lives that were not good, but we internalize the things that they did to us, and we internalize the things that we heard from them anyways. So that therapist is there to stable that, to get rid of all that bad stuff, give you the good stuff. Hey, and I want whatever I'm giving you as a therapist, I want you to internalize that instead of all that stuff that you had as a kid, right? Then, as the therapist is doing that, the client will then be able to replace the destructive or the chaotic internalized objects with the healthier ones. So the ones that they got that were unhealthy, the therapist is going to give them the ones that are healthy. We are considered the good objects, not the bad objects, right? The therapist is also the builder of the holding environment, and you'll see that term too, holding environment. That is just that safe space, right? It's that place where the client can explore their vulnerable feelings without feeling ashamed, without being judged. We are the good objects in our clients' lives as a object relations therapist. The therapist allows a client to regress when they want to, slowly emerge without feeling judged, without having to feel ashamed, without having to internalize those feelings, because we are the good object, right? You can feel this way. You can be vulnerable with me, because I'm not going to make you feel a negative way that you are going to internalize it, and then in part you're going to be destructive with it when you get older. We are the good objects. I cannot stop saying it. I love saying that we are the good objects in therapy. Okay, so here are some of the key terms, and try to keep up with me. It's quite a lot. Your transgenerational models for contextual and object relations. I don't know. They had a point that they had to make, but okay. Projection. This is parts of yourself or what you internalized, right? And you're putting it on somebody else, rather onto your parent or on the therapist. But then when you look at projective identification, we are projecting that onto that person, and then that person is internalizing it. It's like those good and bad objects that we were talking about, right? That good, that bad object that was put onto that person, they internalized it. That's projective identification. And now then we look at insight. That's when we recognize that our early object relationships, again, what we internalize, and how we are now presently working with them. How are we behaving now presently from what we internalized in the past? How are we presently working with it? How do we, what are our behaviors like? What does that look like? What do our emotions and stuff look like with this, right? But then once you gain insight, you begin to work through it. And that's a process, right? Where you are re-experiencing the old, but then now with the therapist, you're able to look at it, and now we need to have healthier, more ways. I'm building this therapeutic relationship so I can work on all the bad, so that my good therapist can replace it. Insight and working through. Keep two of the major key terms for contextual and object relations therapists, right? So key term, again, we have transference and countertransference, and these are some very, very, very familiar terms to all of us as a therapist. It's the unconscious redirective of feelings from earlier relationships, of course, usually with your caregiver, which is your object, and then you're just going to throw it onto the therapist, right? I have a lot of clients that do that with me now. have a lot of my teenage clients that do that with me now as well. But then also you have that countertransference where it's just like reversed. This client is going through something that I've always gone through before, and now I'm feeling some type of way about it, and now I'm going to throw it back on them because I don't like the way it makes me feel. It makes me feel icky, right? Unconscious conflicts that we have, and we're just, from the clients, and we're just going to throw it back at them, right? And then, again, there's that word object. I told you it didn't mean something that you're going to pick up and carry. It's your people. It's your mother. It's your father. That caregiver that you had growing up, whether it was your grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, whoever the case may be. It's those objects, right? And then we have the introjects, right? How one relates to others and themselves. The inner objects that we have. How do we relate with ourselves with what we have internalized, with what we have within us? How do we relate to ourselves, and then how do we relate to others with it, right? Alrighty, so then the assessment phase. So these are some of the key components of the assessment phase. Again, like I said, relationship history, that's that family of origin, attachments earlier on, traumas, anything that's happened, the caregiving environment, what was it like in your home growing up, and then also they're going to explore the early relationships, especially with the primary caregivers. That's mommy and daddy, whoever it was that raised you. But then at the same time, now we need to look at some of these present relationships that this person has with their caregivers. You grew up with them as a kid, you experienced some things. So then what is our relationship with them now? What's the relationship with them presently, in this present moment? What is the relationship like with them? Who's involved in therapy? The therapist chooses who's involved. Or it can be the family members that are directly related to the problem. It's family of origin work, so he needs to dig into history a little bit. And of course, all your transgenerational models, the treatment is long term. And these are some of the goals of therapy, working through and gaining insight. So we're going to be developing insight and work through some of the unresolved conflict. But we also need to be working on developing more ways to how we are going to act healthy once we do recognize this unresolved conflict that we have. And one of the things about the object relations is that the goals are like open. You can change them at any time because the person is growing. So then maybe the goal doesn't have to be the same thing that they've been working on because they've made progress in it. So let's just go ahead and change it, right? And that's lets you know that it's long term. No specific interventions. There's no specific interventions to object relations. The therapist simply listens, works through the transference, counter-transference, gaining insight, working through those unresolved conflicts that you have, changing the goals as they need to. So there's no specific interventions for object relations. So just, that's one load off your mind that you have to worry about for this model, right? So phases of therapy, early phase, again, genogram, early childhood experiences, but they also are going to be looking at some of the past relationships that you've had with people, along with what those present relationships looks like now with your caregivers or those objects, good and bad mother, good and bad father, right? And then the middle phase. So now we're going to be fostering insight, exploring those past relationships. The behaviors that you have now, is it connected to what happened in your childhood? The way that you view things now, is it connected to your childhood? The things that you say, your emotions, your feelings, what you internalize, is that one of the reasons as to why your relationship with your caregiver is like destructive or it's not healthy as it should be? Middle phase is us working through those unresolved conflicts, right? We're working through it. We gain insight. We recognize that we have this issue. We recognize that we have these unresolved conflicts. Now it's time for us to work through it. There's no need for us to still be stuck in the same position that we're in. Let's just work through it, right? So then the late phase is once you've gained the insight, you've worked through it. Now it's time for us to start doing what? We got to implement some of these behaviors with ourselves and with other people. We need to work on reshaping those internalized objects. Like I said, the therapist is the good mother. You may have some of those internalized objects from your mother or your father that were quite negative, that made you feel a certain way. But now, as the object relations therapist, I have replaced that. So now let's reshape those internalized objects, right? So that now you can have that healthy relationship with your caregivers. Even though you may have had a trauma-filled childhood, now we've gained insight on that. We've worked through that. So let's reshape it. Let's get healthy. Let's look at some of those healthy ways of having a relationship with your caregiver. This is another term, but I just did it by itself because it's kind of like separate. But this is like the dirty middle is what they explained it. This is when progress that you have had, it's like stopping or you're regressing. You know, your old defenses to some of those internalized objects or some of those internalized things that you've heard as a child is now reemerging. And then sometimes that transference is going to intensify, which is a given, which is going to happen because you are now replaced as the good mother to help that, right? To help reshape that, right? Frustration, fear, anger is going to surface for both the client and the therapist, but you're going to gain insight on that and then you're going to work through that, right? This stage also reflects the client's struggle to let go of some of those maladaptive internal objects, like what you've gone through in your childhood for so long. It's hard as an adult to kind of like part ways with it, right? But at the same time, we are recognizing them. We are recognizing some of that unresolved stuff, and then we're going to gain insight, and then we're going to have to just work through it, right? It's a given. The transference and counter-transference is going to happen. It's a part of the object relations theory. You're going to welcome it, and then you're going to look through it or whatever, see it, look at it differently, gain the insight, work through it, and then develop more healthier ways to be in the relationship with your caregivers as well as also the therapist as well. So, how to recognize object relations theory on the MFT exam. We are going to be looking for language, same way for any other model. Look for language that matches with this theory. Object relations is big on the word what? Object. Early attachments with caregivers, internal objects, splitting, that is one of the major terms as well. Transference, countertransference, good, bad object, holding environment, early caregiver relationships, genograms is going to be one of your things too as well, but make sure you have the right transgenerational model and the right words is matching that because all three of them use genograms, right? So if the therapist serves as a good object, holding figure, like that holding environment, creating a safe space, you know it's automatically going to be object relations theory. Transference, countertransference, object relations theory, right? Aiming to repair anything that was internalized, that was destructive, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be dealing with object relations theory. Practice matching the vignette clues to theoretical models. That's across the board. Know what object relations theory is really big on versus what Bowen is, or versus what contextual is. CBT, structural therapy. You will know that like structural therapy, if they don't dig in the past, they don't do anything relational ethically wise, they don't worry about ledger and merits. You know the difference between structural and object relations theory. You should know the difference between structural therapy and contextual therapy and how to recognize it. That way, when you see it, if it does not say as a object relations therapist, you automatically know, hey, this vignette or this scenario is talking about a object relations therapist. Makes sense? Okay, now, how are we feeling about object relations theory? Because it's about the same way that you're going to look at it history-wise as contextual or Bowen, right? Try and compare those models to each other, Bowen, contextual, and object relations. That way you'll be able to see some of the major specifiers or the major differences between those models. They are all transgenerational models. They focus on the family of origin. They focus on the history, childhood experiences, childhood attachments and stuff. They are all really heavy on history. As a matter of fact, I believe these are the only 3 models that do that. There is no other model that does that. So anything mentions of history-wise, you know it's one of your transgenerational models. Stay the course. Let me know if you have any questions for this model. If I missed anything, please let me know. If you do not understand something and you need a better understanding of it, please let me know. Leave a comment, send me a message, whatever the case may be. I am here to support you.